Shalom, Kol Halal, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakaha Kodash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity. The would-be judges, the 144,000, 12,000 men from the 12 tribes of Israel, the tabernacle of David, that is to be the new government here on earth as the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven, as the scriptures say. And to the rest of the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be among the heathen nations, that have the appearance of the heathen nations, the Israelite foreigners, all right, that the angels are coming to gather up under the orders of who the world ignorantly and fraudulently called JC, all right, Yahushai. And to the few Akwath that are listening and learning to you, I say Shalom. This is part 2, all right, of the Black Negro, really brown, foundations of ancient Greece, all right, because once again, this guy who has some legitimate and true historical points, he's coming at it from a very carnal point. He comes at it from a point that Europe, which is really in Asia, all right, and all of Asia was just like all of Africa, was Tawny and swarthy. All of Africa and all of Asia were both tawny and swarthy. What that means, all right, I use the same receipt as a description of the Lord when the Lord is described as all right, when the Lord is described as a jasper stone or sardine stone. Okay. And here's that receipt. And this is both tawny and swarthy. Hence the reason why they replaced the word black with swarthy. Because swarthy is pertaining to skin complexion. As you can see, my skin is very close to the tawny side. Well, let me turn the light on, actually. It's a lot here. All right, because I'm not the darkest person. But the world will very much refer to me when they see me as a Negro. And you can see from tawny to swarthy. All right, here is even better shot. There you go. See? From tawny to swarthy. So I'm a pretty light complected person. All right. As compared to some of my darker brethren. All right. So, and this is how Israel came, from swarthy to tawny. All of Asia was, and all of Africa was swarthy and tawny. So was America. So what that's telling you, and you can read Ben Franklin's 1751 letter, page, paragraph 24. Matter of fact, I'll get it. I'm pretty sure I have that right here in the receipts. Paragraph 24 of the letter that he wrote in 1724 as describing America and the world. He even talked about Europe. Okay, I'm just trying to locate it. I know I have it. It's in here somewhere. Just bear with me for a second. There's a lot of receipts in here that I use for edification purposes. And, you know, and I'm in on this part 2, even though I have some scriptures written down, some talking points, you know, I'm still going through the spirit. So this wasn't a, you know, planned out, oh, well, here we go with this. So we see this. This is a receipt. All right, shows someone albino. All right, and showing you pale flesh, fair. All right, so-called white people. When you get over here to tawny, look what you see: light brown to dark brown. All right, swarthy. Tawny is within swarthy, from light brown to dark brown. All right, and that is the color range of so-called Negroes and much of the rest of the world. And Ben Franklin, I'm trying to find it in that letter, and it's paragraph 24. He breaks it down and speaks about it. America being tawny and swarthy. I'm just trying to locate it so I can read it before I move on with the information. This may be it right here. Yep, this is it. Found it. And this is in the letter that Ben Franklin wrote. And this is paragraph 24. And it's called, what is that letter called? It's from 17. So you could just Google Ben Franklin's letter, 1751. All right. And this was a letter written to white Americans about basically getting rid of America of tawnies and swarthy people. All right. And making it all pale or red. He said, our beautiful pale and red, knowing that the so-called white man is the real red man. All right. Copper color, which can be, right there in the middle with sardine and tawny. It was the color of the average American, from swarthy to tawny. But on paragraph 24, it says, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. That's true. Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, as I'm going to read, came from not the Caucasus Mountains, but from Mount Seir, which is south of, and they lived in those caves in the shadows out of the direct sunlight, in the caves of Mount Seir below Israel in the land of Jordan. All right. Okay. Their second cave home was the Caucasus Mountains, which they were forced into the Caucasus Mountains after the fall of Rome by the Israelites, who were the ruling class people that were being called Greeks. All right. And in a lot of cases, many of them were being called Greeks. See, that's where the confusion comes in. So that's what we're going to clear up. But back to this letter. It says, when it says that they are very small, because it won't fit. Maybe I can do it this way. Ha-ha. Do it sideways. Okay. Still have to make it bigger. Okay. It says, the number of purely white people in the world are proportionately very small. All of Africa is black or tawny. We just showed you that definition and breakdown. Asia chiefly tawny. All right, which is Asia was also very swarthy as well, but tawny falls under swarthy. It says the French, the Russians, the Swedes are all generally what we call swarthy complexion. See, so Europe, the portion of Eurasia, the portion of Europe, which we showed in the portion of Asia, which they call Europe, which is still in Asia, was very swarthy, very dark. Okay. And it says, right. So it says in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are all generally what we call swarthy complexion, as are the Germans. Also the Saxons only accepted, which was a lie, because they try to make themselves the Anglo-Saxons. They are not the angelic sons of Isaac. They are the Edomites. All right, who with the English make up the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I can wish their numbers were increased, while we are, as I may call it, scourging our planet by clearing America's woods and making this side of the globe reflect a brighter and light to the eyes inhabitants of Mars and Venus. So basically, they're getting rid of all the brown and tawny people in America to make it white, which is what the whole Mao of making America white again. All right. It says, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, showing you that the so-called white man never believed in the Lord, but he believed in all them same false gods that they were following when they became the Greeks when they became the Romans, as I'm going to show you, because all they did was regurgitate Babylonian and Egyptian gods and made them white during the time of Alexander. All right, and he's a very key and important point in this history when Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, came into power. All right, and it says, so making this side of the globe reflect the blighted light to the eyes of the inhabitants in Mars or Venus, the fake gods they worship. Why should we, in the superior sight of beings, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa as if everybody dark came from Africa? That is the lie and the pseudoscience that Esau Edom pushes. All of Asia was also swarthy and tawny. All of America was also swarthy and tawny. You know, so these people are liars. And it says, by planting them in America, we, where we have so fair opportunity, all right, by excluding all blacks and tawnies of, I can't see it now. I have to change it back. It says of excluding all blacks and tawnies, and wait, hold on. I lost my place. We have so fair opportunity by excluding all blacks and tawnies of increasing the lovely white and red. But perhaps I am partial to complexion of my country so much kind of partially is this natural? Is it natural to mankind? So he's saying it's partial for mankind to be, you know, partial to its own. And the truth of the matter is, as we explained in part 1, that it's not your color that determines who you are. It is the seed of your father. Because pale men impregnate dark women, swarthy and tawny women, and the children can come out looking like their moms, but they're still the seed of that person, and vice versa. Even especially now today, men of color, especially Negroes, impregnate a lot of pale women. All right, and those children, though sometimes they come out looking like the mom, and there's thousands of examples of that all across the internet. All right, even some celebrities that you would never know had a so-called black parent, but they lived their life. You know, they were in years past, in decades past, they were called passing. You know, white passing. All right, you know, a white passing Negro, and that sort of thing. Okay, so getting back to this whole Asia and Europe thing, we did it in the first video, but every time I say it, it's important that I show it, that receipt, all right, which speaks upon that Europe. This is a very important point to just drive home, that Europe sits in Asia, and it's one continent. This is a receipt of Eurasian definition from the Oxford Dictionary, 1850. And if you look at definition 1, it says of or pertaining to Eurasia, to Europe and Asia, considering as forming in reality one continent. And it tells you in the book of so I think it's 2nd Ezra, the 6th chapter, about the 6 parts of the earth. The 7th part is water. All right, the 7th, it talks about the 7th part, the 6th part. The 6 parts of the earth, all right, are the 6 continents. There are not 7 continents, never have been. And so Esau Edom's first home is Mount Seir, which is south of Israel in the land of Jordan. Okay? Point, that is where the Esau Edom, he lived in the shadows of those caves and in those hills and mountains, you know, and he stayed out of the light for the most part. And that's the brutal truth. So let's talk about, because this guy talks in his video, you know, he's coming from the perspective that everyone is pale. You know, this is a very carnal thing, that everyone is pale came from the so-called white man, and everyone is black came from Africa. That's that fraudulent social construct of blackness and that fraudulent social construct of whiteness. And I can't speak about it enough. And it is important biblically and scripturally to understand who's who and what's what. and that the fact that the Israelites got scattered among all people of the earth, as according to the scriptures. All right. It tells you that in the Bible, the Israelites are scattered among all people. So some of them are going to look like these heathen nations. So going back to the Bible, we're going to read First Maccabees, which gives you the history of when Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, came into power. This is when he came into power. This is why they love Alexander, and they talk about the Greece being the home of civilization, you know, and this, that, and the other. All right, but in First Maccabees, the first chapter, it says in chapter 1, verse 1. It happened after Alexander, the son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius the king of the Persian Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. So these Edomites were reigning over these dark-skinned Etruscans. This book right here that I'm holding in my hand, and it's a 4-part series. I own 2 of them. Okay, it's full of, and this on the cover is showing you how the Greeks went from being dark to light. All right. The Western art, and it's called The Image of Black in Western Art. And just like this Jake here, this brother here that made this video, all right, from a gentleman's perspective, he also points out that a lot of this information that he was using came from so-called white people. So this information is coming from so-called white people. All right. Matter of fact, I'll just bring it up on the screen. All right. And here's volume 2 of that book that I'm circling, all right, showing you the royalty and the knights of Europe during the Dark and Middle Ages, all the way up until the Renaissance, all right, when Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, came back into power. But what I'm reading in the Bible is the beginning of when they first came into power. So back to First Maccabees 1 and 2. It says, and so after he took over Greece, in verse 2, it says, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth and went throughout the ends of the earth, which was Asia. There was no mention of Europe in this Bible. Asia is mentioned 28 times within the 6 parts of the earth. Europe is not mentioned once because Europe didn't exist until they created the concept of Europe. Europe sits in Asia. Same as the so-called Middle East. All right. You can go back to on this channel and go back a couple videos to see the video where it says there was never any land bridge. And yes, the Israelites, the people in the Americas, did come from Asia. They came from Western Asia. You call it the Middle East. They didn't come from the part of Asia that you call Siberia or Russia. That's a fraud. That's a lie. Okay. And even still, before the so-called white man took over Siberia and Russia, they were dark and tawny people. Swarthy, from tawny to swarthy people. Okay? And so back in verse 3 of 1 Maccabees 1 and 3. And he went through the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted in his heart and was lifted up. So once again, through Alexander, Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed so-called white man, came into power and got dominion over the earth, as it was prophesied that he would. All right, it was prophesied he would get dominion over the earth. Okay, it says, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over the countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while they were yet alive. Those are Alexander's 4 generals, which you can find these generals in secular history and encyclopedias and taught in colleges and high schools still to this day. All right. Ptolemy over Egypt. Then you had Cassander, Seleucus. You had and damn, I always forget the 4th one's names. But nevertheless, you can look them up, okay? But it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, Okay, and his servants bear rule everyone in his place, and his servants killed his son. Alexander actually had a son, and they killed him to make sure he wouldn't raise up to become the rightful, ruler over this new kingdom of so-called white men. But Alexander set them up that they would rule and and keep their thing going. But as usual, you see Esau, Edom wars on each other because no one wants to. They don't have that kind of unity. They had unity enough to overtake you Jakes, but as you can see now, they're all divided. NATO versus America and Israel, and you can see these Edomites are all divided, man. But it says, and I'll read verse 7 again. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them, and many years and evils, and after them many years and evils were multiplied in the earth. So it's literally, the Bible is telling you, when it says Job 9:26, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Well, that's backed up by 1 Maccabees 1:9, because it's telling you when the Edomites came into power, evils increased in the earth. And one of those evils was the covering up of history. All right, the fraudulent lies and the covering up of history. Okay, so you're not taught about these black rulers in Europe. Every time you see a period piece about Henry VIII or Edward I, all these 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th century, 13th century monarchs, they show you white people. Okay. When when they show you Troy and all these period pieces, they don't show you, for example, let me see, I know I got some images of the Etruscans and Minoans in here somewhere. They don't show you people that look like this. All right. These are actually what you would call these people today, because this is Ajax carrying the body of Achilles. All right, in 570 to 565 BC, and this is sitting in the Florence Archaeology Museum. All right, white men wouldn't portray themselves this way. These were the Picts. These were your Samoans, your the Samoans and the Hawaiians and the Tongans and all those people. They actually lived in Asia, in the parts of Asia that you called Greece. And that was them. You can even see that headdress that they wear. Even in the early 1900s, late 1800s, the kings in Hawaii were still wearing those headdresses. And they still built their homes like they built them in ancient Greece. It's just too much evidence. All right. Where are those two pictures? I know. Hey, here we go. The Wadi Yahweh. Okay. You can also pull these up on it, but this is showing you the people of, and you can see that guy looks like, one of them big old Samoan dudes, man. But these were the Europeans, the Etruscans in Rome and Greece. All right. And they weren't black. They were brown. They were tawny. They love to call something brown black. Okay. So let's let this receipt play out right here, because this is the author of those 4 books, and I have 2 of them.
This is one of the most exciting days of my professional career. It gives me an enormous amount of pleasure to be here and to welcome you all to the M. Victor Leventrit Symposium, a truly remarkable event commemorating today the launch of The Image of the Black in Western Art, 2nd edition, published by the Harvard University Press. See these 4 volumes? They have been 20 years in the making, and I want to tell you the story. All started in the year 1960, when Dominique de Menil, who was a brilliant collector and critic,
because I was trying to get everything together.
This is one of the most exciting days of my professional career. It gives me an enormous amount of pleasure to be here and to welcome you all to the M. Victor Leventrit Symposium, a truly remarkable event commemorating today the launch of The Image of the Black in Western Art, 2nd edition, published by the Harvard University Press. You see these 4 volumes? They have been 20 years in the making, and I want to tell you the story. All started in the year 1960 when Dominique de Menil, who was a brilliant collector and critic of art and a great philanthropist, decided with her husband John that they wanted to make a contribution to the civil rights movement in Houston, Texas, that would somehow take advantage of their love of and passion for art collecting. And they decided to commission a man, Ladislas Bugner, in Paris.
This is a very strong, a very strong argument to read this scripture. What these people did is actually Psalm 64 and 8. Okay? And I'm going to read that real quick. Because they let their own tongues fall upon themselves. And it reads, so that they shall make their own tongues fall upon themselves, all that see them shall flee away. And as I said, I have volume 1 and 3. What I'm missing is volume 2 and 4. Now that I know that I knew that there was a 3. I didn't know that there was a 4. I knew that there was a 2, but I did not know that there was a 4. So this is that was news to me.
Look at High Western
and that's
art.
the number 3 is the one with Saint Maurice on it. Okay? But number 1 is so devastating to the time periods when so-called white people were supposed to be ruling, according to almost every movie you've seen in Hollywood. And it's showing you black people in rulership, black people as royalty. And I'm only saying black because you know, for the lack of your understanding, most of you are ignorant to the fact that there's no such thing as black people. They were actually brown in complexion, like the man is speaking. All right, he's brown. He's not black at all. Okay, and I wish I hate that word because once again, the black, by saying black, they're disrespecting you when they know that you're physically and visibly brown, and they choose to call you black. Refer back to the first video to see the definition of black and white, so that you can get an understanding why I'm saying that.
And gather images of noble people of color, noble Africans who had been represented, much to the great surprise of most of us.
See, once again, they try to refer to everyone as brown as African. These people in Greece and these people all over Asia, they were not African. The whole world was swarthy and tawny, including America, and Ben Franklin told you that. So this guy, is notable. This particular guy is speaking for pushing that African lie, that blackness lie. Okay, because Negroes and Israelites are both swarthy and tawny, especially because Africans are mostly swarthy. It's very few tawny of them, but Negroes have always been tawny to swarthy, and there's clearly and truly a difference between the two. And to be and just to be brutally honest, all right, the Negro is much more attractive collectively, all right, than the average African. All right, Africans generally are not that attractive at all, collectively, okay? I'm not going to say that every African is ugly. I mean, I've seen some pretty attractive African women, but collectively, especially their men, all right, this is Ham, the youngest son of Noah, the progenitor of the dark race, is not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. So everybody dark is not an Egyptian, an Ethiopian, Libyan, or a Canaanite. The Negroes were dark too, and they were from Shem. All right? And this was also from this information is also from a collection of so-called white authors and scholars that put the Zondervan's Dictionary Bible together. And also in the Young's Dictionary Bible, it's the same definition, and it reads even bolder, also put together by white scholars who actually told the truth.
About this subject, most of us, particularly in 1960, were almost completely ignorant, except for a few scholars. And they thought, Madame de Menil once told me, that the project would take maybe a year. What would they find? Maybe 1,000 images? Well, that was 1960, and this is 2010. And that's 50 years later. and scholars working collectively, initially under Ladislas Bugner, now under my colleague David Beinman, have collected 26,000 images of persons of African descent.
And see, and they're trying to push that they're of African descent, because you know what had happened in 2010. This was in 2010. So in 2007, the Hebrew Israelites came on the internet and were teaching you the truth. So what he's trying to push is that pro-Africanism and try to and this Bindman. So what really happens, even though these books are great books to have, and this Jewish author that helped them put it together, this is to push that no, these were Africans in Greece, in Jerusalem, and in Rome. No, these were Israelites. This is Acts 9 and 29. And he spake boldly in the name of the Lord Yahushua and disputed against the Grecians, but they went about to slay him. So this dispute between the Hebrews, all right, because this lines up with Acts 6 and 1, and the Grecians, these Grecians here were Greek-speaking Hebrews. And they were called the Hellenists, the Hellenist. All right. And so this guy constantly pushes that lie of African. And that's a lie. That's not true.
And this archive is now housed, I'm proud to say, here at the Du Bois Institute at Harvard. And how did it get here? Wow, that's an interesting story too. The moment of continuity between the various phases and incarnations of this project consists of one person, and her name is Karen C.C. Dalton. And Karen happened to have fallen in love with an architect who was living in Boston, a man named Todd Lee. And she fell in love with Todd about the same time that Anthony Appie and I were recruited to Harvard to rebuild African and African American studies.
See, so this dude is a straight Cunalite, okay? Because as the Israelites were battling on the highways and byways to educate and edify our people, all right, and know that you're the Hebrews, we're the people of the Bible. He didn't acknowledge that there weren't dark people in these places, but what he's trying to do is solidify that no, they were Africans. Yes, they were there. All right. So if that were the case, where are the stories in the books of Africans conquering Europe and ruling in Ireland, Scotland, England, Britain, you know, in the 1900s, in the turn of the century? All right. Because when you go back to this brother's book that he profiled, he talked about the Negro question, and the Negro question talked about all the black bodies, all right, that were found throughout all of Asia, all of Europe, which is in Asia, okay, and how their bodies and their DNA matched the DNA of the bodies of the slaves in Egypt. Did you hear what I just told you? So, my man here is a liar and a hireling trying to
and so I went to Neil.
Let me just mute his sound, but he's a liar and a hireling trying to Africanize the Hebrew Israelites. Okay? That's what he was hired to do. So since the evidence was so overwhelming that these Negroes were in rulership during the Dark Ages, that they were definitely there during all these biblical times and places, they couldn't refute that anymore. So what they do is they use people like him and then unlearned individuals like this guy from a gentleman's perspective to try and Africanize the Hebrews. Okay? So let's read one last scripture. This is Acts, the book of Acts 6 and 1. And it says, and in those days, the number of the disciples will multiply, and there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews because their widows were neglected in the daily administration. So an unlearned Christian or some person like him would, these were, white people, and the Lord clearly was for all people. So it's like, no, why would the Greeks have issues with what the Hebrews were doing and their families? No, because these Greeks spoken that are talked about in this scripture were Hebrews also. And how do you know that? When you look up the word Grecian, remember, every word in the Bible in the New Testament is numbered in the blue in the blue Bible, the blue letter Bible, and then the Strong's Concordance. All right, and the same thing is for the Old Testament. And if the Old Testament is going to be H, meaning Hebrew, whatever the number is usually a 3 or 4 digit number after, or it's going to be G and a 3 or 4 digit number after it. So every word in the Bible is numbered so that you can read what it actually means in the Greek or in the Hebrew. All right. And so in the Greek, the scripture I just read, Grecians, that word there is Hellenist, all right, or Hellenistas. And what that word breaks down to was a Greek-speaking Jew, all right? So you got Hellenist and Hellenista. One means a Greek-speaking Jew, and the other is referring to an Israelite that made the Greek way of life. They followed after the heritage of the Greek way of life and disregarded their own. Roughly paraphrased. That's the breakdown. Either way, we're still talking about Israelites. Okay? And that's why Paul was making it very clear. Are they Hebrews? So am I. You know, are they Israelites? So am I. One of my favorite scriptures. That's 2 Corinthians 10 and 22. I mean, 2 Corinthians 11 and 22. Okay? So this thing is all about the Hebrew Israelites and not just dark people. The whole world was dark except for Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed white man. All right. And then in these books, what make them so great is it is showing you that these people. So where is this history? Where are the movies that about these people? These ruling class people. All right. But those, what you're looking at right now on the screen, that was, let's bring him back. I recognize that bus. But that there, all right, is one of those Hellenized, because I have a different book that has that image in it. That was one of those Hellenized Jews, Israelites, spoken of in Acts 6 and 1. So with that, I want to give all praises, all honor and glory unto Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rakah HaKwadash, Kwam Yasharala, Abad Babal.